This is Clarence. He is 1 year old today. These are his friends. Like all babies, they were born with 100 billion neurons, nearly twice as many as an adult, even though their brains are half the size. Their brains are growing faster than any other part of their bodies. 60% of their metabolism is being spent on growing their brains. By 3, their brain volume will have doubled. But those 100 billion neurons will not stay forever. As the children move, play, and learn, these neurons are being connected into circuits. Circuits that govern emotions, motor skills, and speech. The circuits that are used get reinforced. The circuits that are neglected get pruned away. What remains is a basic structure that will influence the rest of their life. It is how they will see the world. It will influence their thinking, feelings, their joys and fears. Most of how the world will seem, how they will fit, what they will do, will come from this brain. So if you want to change the world for the future, build the brain. Focus on these first 3 years, feelings, and in the first 3 years, parents make the difference.
Welcome to this evening's discussion about mental wellness. We are excited to invite Kathryn Lige from the Child Mind Institute to discuss with us. She is a wonderful woman and a mother. She's a social worker in the Student Success Program at the Child Mind Institute in the San Francisco Bay Area. She has served many communities of color, tackling social emotional challenges. She has worked one-on-one with children and families to support improved academic and behavioral outcomes. And she is just a woman who is excited that change is in the moment, is happening now, and that we can make a better future. Kathryn, welcome. And we're so grateful that you're here. And to start off with, let's just hear your takeaway from American Tragedy.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to be here. So thank you. Really, what I'm here to say is, I mean, this was not only an incredible documentary, but it was moving. And I think the most important takeaway from American Tragedy is that poor mental health is taking the lives of children. And now there's some action that needs to be had. And so I'm loving the conversation that is happening, and that there was something like this to start that.
Well, thank you. And that was what we wanted. This is the beginning of a conversation, not an end of a movie. And we want people to say, hey, what can we do? And we even had a person who texted or emailed or something, communicated with us and said, I watched the movie. Now I know what do I need to do? And that's one reason why you are here. So I would like to give you some time. Oh, no, let me start over again. I want to introduce my co-moderator, Jose Silva, Dr. Jose Silva, who is the president of the Colorado Association for Infant Mental Health. He himself has had an incredible story and has a heart as big as the world. And he wants to make change, and he wants to help whomever and whatever organization that is trying to make change. And that's one of the things that we talked about before we started, is that we need to hold hands. We need to gather together and work as a team. And as a team, we can make a difference. Kathryn, I'd love to let you just talk to the audience about what people can do to improve mental health, or about whatever message you feel would be most important for them.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing when we're thinking about mental health is that mental health still has a bad connotation. I mean, let's really understand that there's some stigma here that we really need to dismantle before we can do anything. Because if we're going to be on the ground doing the work, or if there's going to be policies had or anything, just anything created to fight this, we're all going to have to reevaluate what we think is mental health. And we all have mental health. And I think we've gotten into this this perspective that, you know, mental health is related to mental illness. And although that can be true, we all have a mental health that we need to keep healthy. And it's similar to our physical health. And some people are talking about that. But I think we are still having to have this conversation of what mental health is. And once we solidify that, I think that can actually make a difference. So not only does mental health have you know, a bad connotation still, and there's some stigma there, but I think just like mindfulness, which we there was, you know, talk about that in American Tragedy, this is a skill. I mean, we have to build this skill. There's coping skills we need to understand. We need to understand ourselves, our behaviors, our thought processes. There's a lot that we are just living with, and it's been a norm to just go through life, and maybe we acknowledge that, maybe we have some self-awareness, but we have to dig deeper. And because what we do does affect other people, and then it also affects how we, you know, treat someone, or you know, what we do with them. And so I would say that that's the first key point, is that I want to say that we have to really understand what mental health is. We can understand that there is a need for some more understanding, or more of a discussion around mental illnesses, because that is very important, and there should be some space to talk about that. But what about our general mental health? Just those things that we need to understand about ourselves, and why we think the way that we do, and thinking about the environment and how that contributes to that. So thinking about that as the first point. And the second point, like I said, going back to mindfulness, is that we're building on these skills, the skill sets that we need to stay healthy mentally. And so I think that with American Tragedy, it was apparent that we need to have some sort of action. And what could that be? And so what we're actually doing at the Child Mind Institute, which we are based in New York City, but also we have a new location in the San Francisco Bay Area, is we're doing just that. We're thinking about how to transform the lives of children. And so something that I do as a social worker is I work with schools. I'm a part of the public education sector. And the reason why we have decided to have not only a medical practice where, you know, kids are coming in and being seen, but we have to go into the schools and what that looks like. We have several tiers. I mean, there's a couple tiers that are in schools that we really need to pinpoint. One being, there's the teachers, as well as the administrators, and then of course the students. And so I'm even working within that facet to figure things out. Not only that, but through a couple different districts and a couple different schools. But really what we're trying to do, as I would say the bigger picture, is connecting the school, the home, and the community. And that's really what we need to understand. I think coming from the point of view of we need to do something, well, where do you stand on that? What are we doing in terms of how this relates to our community, how it relates to the students and education, but also what are we doing at home? Because it's really going to start there.
Kathryn, I love that. And we have a clip that we want to show from American Tragedy that also points about that and will help us direct our questions.
We can teach kids at 3 or 4 years of age how to be calm breathers and how to slow down. We can teach kids to start using emotional words at a very early age. That's when anything is possible.
How do you feel right now, friends? Good. You feel good? Can you describe in words how you feel right now? Pete, how do you feel right now?
I feel calm.
You feel calm? Honey, how do you feel?
I feel calm and relaxed.
You feel calm and relaxed? You can see, how do you feel?
I feel really good.
You feel really good. You look like you feel really good. Very nice. Andrew, how do you feel? Have any of you practiced the mindful breathing at home?
Yes.
At home?
I practice it on Sunday.
On Sunday? Was there something that crossed your mind that made you want to think about relaxing?
I was thinking about Christmas.
You're thinking about Christmas? Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else practice mindfulness at home? So you can see.
I did mindfulness with my mom.
You did mindfulness with your mom? What kind of mindfulness did you do with your mom?
if we're going to fix this problem, it's going to be the love, caring, support, and the long-term commitment from people who care about you most, which tends to be your family.
Sounds like exactly what you're saying, isn't it, Kathryn?
Yes, very similar.
And, as a mother who is a social worker, I'm sure you use skills for your own children.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to practicing these things, like I said, these are, and as the student said in the short clip, we are practicing these things. So what are we looking at every single day is how we're coping and how we're reacting to things. So I mean, when it comes to the deep breathing, I mean, paced breathing is a wonderful skill, I think, to really pay attention to what your breath is. What does that look like? That I think was a great start. I think not only that, but I also tried to practice, those feelings and identification. I feel blank because blank. And that will really help us understand how to identify our feelings and why we're feeling them. And, rather than, I think it really helps with the social problem solving aspect of things, because you can really start to see, well, I feel angry because you did this. And we have a lot of thoughts. And I think, it gets kind of scientific in understanding these things, but I try to break it down as we have a state of being. So we have a state of being, we have our feelings, and then we have our thoughts. And so the state of being is, or the state of being can be you feel powerless, or you feel bored or something like that. And then the actual feeling can be, I feel happy, or I feel sad, or I feel, disappointed. And then we can also identify what those thoughts are. So those are the types of things that I like to practice with my kids, because I think that it not only helps them, but I think it helps me, me as well. And it helps us to understand one another.
I love that. I love that. Jose, do you have any questions you'd like to ask her?
I would. I do. I've been sitting here just listening and through the beginning part of our conversation. And I'm a Black Latino male who experienced tons of trauma before the age of 14. And counseling in my community and in the hood was not something we talked about. How do we, as the Black community, stop hiding behind the conversation around mental health and move that to the forefront for our children's good?
Yeah, absolutely. As a Black woman, honestly, and talking to my own family.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's why I was like, I'm like, we have you here, right? Let's have that conversation.
Let's get down to it. I mean, so this is where I want to start, is that this is the part that comes from the home, right? This is the work that needs to be done in the home, because the conversation is not being had because of generations of traumas or stigmas that we just haven't dismantled yet. So having that conversation at home, you're pressing against those norms. You have to really fight against them, because it will feel uncomfortable. Get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. And I think that is something, I mean, I know that it's really hard. I think it might be our culture as Americans, or it might just be our culture as Black Americans, but we really don't like the notion of changing our perspective. We try to really justify how we think and how we feel, and really without sometimes I would say without consideration to maybe there's a way to change this. And I think we have that saying that old habits die hard. It takes a long time to dismantle that and really get through that. So it starts in the home. You have to recognize and be aware, and the tone in which I speak to my kids, is that something that is actually helpful to them, or is that going to be unhelpful? And taking that step back, I've been doing this for years. My parents did this with me, or things like that. That doesn't really help us connect to our kids. And I would say, from my own observation, is kids are a little bit tougher, I would say, than we might have been, to push back on that and say, this is how it needs to be, because I know the truth about this. Racism is wrong. Having unfit mental wellness is not okay. So I want to do something about it. And they need their role models, they need their support to help them do that. So it's about educating yourself. It's about making sure that you have the willingness. You have to really go deep in there and try to make sure that whatever it is that you're feeling about things that may come up for you, we have that responsibility as parents.
So then I love that. Thank you so much for that. Like that's the honest answer. We have to face that, right? So then now let's broaden it a little more. We've talked about how to do that in the home. How do we broaden the context of that around mindfulness as a skill and create equity around who gets that skill or how that skill is delivered in the broader context of the community?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, because when I think about, so there's two facets of this, and we talk, it's talked a lot about in American tragedy, that, we have the social emotional piece that we need to put into schools. This needs to be a general idea of social emotional learning that we need across the community, the home, and inside of the schools. Now, when it comes to treatment, that's another layer, I would say, to this. Trauma treatment for depression and anxiety and disorders such as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. That is another layer, right? But really, if we're trying to get on the baseline here, that is social emotional learning. And so that includes mindfulness. We do workshops for the Child Mind Institute. Is what I typically do is with kids in classrooms, I will teach them about how to identify their feelings. There's another workshop on social problem solving. There's one about mindfulness and relaxation. There's one about managing thoughts and managing big emotions when they come up. We have adaptations for little kids so that they can understand, and we're trying to gear that towards even high schoolers, on how to really go through these things that are normal for us to experience in that context. And so once we get to that, then we can really see who needs that additional help. And if you are within the education system, you probably know of those multi-tiers of, there's some kids that need that extra layer of support, and then that extra layer of support, we'll get to them. But we need that baseline to be that social emotional learning, and it needs to be in all facets, like I said, homeschool and community.
Thank you so much. Lisa.
Love that. Yes. And I was thinking about the idea that sometimes most of us just need a hammer, a screwdriver, nails, and screws, and we're just fine. We need those tools, though. We can't build almost anything without some tools. So I think we need to change the conversation around get help when you're sick to get the tools in your toolbox now, so that when you have something that come up, even common everyday things, you can use those tools. But there will be people who will need a lot more tools. And
exactly.
And we need to be compassionate and understanding and non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to have a kind of a paradigm shift from mental health skills are people who either have mental illness or will get mental illness, to mental health skills are for every single person. They're the hammer, the screwdriver, the nails, the pliers that are everyday tools that we all need to gain. Yeah. And to have in our toolbox of life.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of two. Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Well, I mean, look at it in the physical health realm. I mean, I think doctors can probably attest to this a lot more, but there is this, notion of like, how much preventative care, can we really advocate for and promote? Because there's things with our physical health that, if you eat healthy, if you work out, if you, these are all sort of things that, doctors will say are good for good health. And we need to know those skills as well for our mental health. And that isn't something that we'll just know. Just like with your physical health, there's a lot of science and a lot of things put into understanding our body. We have a lot of information on how to have mental wellness. And a lot of people don't even have access to that education or that knowledge.
Well, two questions. We have a viewer question that I want to bring up, but how can we get the access? I mean, why is it not there? Is it just financial, not understanding that these are really important skills, as important as the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s in my mind? I mean, is it just a mindset that we're dealing with, or is it something beyond that I don't understand?
I honestly, Lisa, I think this is a great question. And I want to say it's everything. Because when it comes down to having that knowledge, finances are going to make a difference. We are going to need more social workers, more counselors, more people to go out. But it's also a mindset because if this is not a priority, then we'll never get to it. So even if we have the finances, we have the finances for it, but that's not a priority. That's the thing, is it's not a priority. So I want to say the first thing is really changing your mindset, but we're going to have that financial component come in at some point. But firstly, starting with, okay, in your workplace, it's about culture. Let's talk about culture. Now, school culture, culture in your home, culture in the community, that is really what's going to change. My governor, Governor Newsom, he's talked about how, there can be lots of policies about this, that, and anything else, but it's really about a shift in culture. We guide that. So we're going to have to speak up about it and say, we want this. We need to have the willingness, but we also need to take action. And what are we doing to dismantle those things? Are we, reaching out to our friends when, their mood is maybe a little bit off? Are we taking care of ourselves with that stress management? Are we focusing on self-care? Are we understanding what we need in our relationships with other people? These things, I want to say, Lisa, these things are not talked about enough.
I would agree with you there, Kathryn. This is a lot of the work that I do around social emotional learning, classroom emotional climate. How do you tie those two in and bring them into the classroom? But then you have to inform the educator to remove their deficit thinking, right? Socialize them to those cultures and those components. And so as we're thinking about those kind of specific skills, but more importantly for the parent, what would you say that a parent can do to help support their 3-year-old to calm them down? So then that behavior isn't seen as a deficit. It's just seen as a child's behavior. But if that child enters into a Head Start, then they enter into the school to prison pipeline, right?
Yeah, this is a good one, and especially with the smaller kiddos, and I love them because it's all expression when it comes to the little ones. So I would say for a parent, this is really, to start, is going to be the reaction. I think that's where we need to start. When our kids are having temper tantrums, or when they're asking for things, if they're curious about things, it's going to really be dependent on how we respond to that. So if we can allow our child to have a temper tantrum, and then we'll say, well, what is it that made you feel like this? And let them explain, validate their experience. And then we can say, okay, so now how can we try to fix this? How can we try to make you feel better? Some of us go to ice cream, some of us go to a new toy, but really, what can you do for an additional layer of connection with your child so that they can understand you emotionally, and then you can understand them emotionally? And I want to say too, don't hold back on your own understanding of your emotion, and saying that you need to also identify how you feel. This is also, this temper tantrum, honey, is really making me feel frustrated as well. And we're both now in this, that we're both feeling these really big emotions, these intense feelings. So it's about you also getting vulnerable. I think we want to be, as parents, we want to have the answers. And I love that about being a parent. I think it's great that we want to rescue our kids, but we don't have all the answers. And that's unfortunate, but the good news is that we can go get that information. So yes, I think that's, as far as parents, that's where I would go with that.
I had a beautiful experience just this past weekend, or last week, I guess. I had a grandson who had a temper tantrum. We had a big family picnic in our backyard, and he had, I don't remember why, but his dad held him and put his hands up. This young boy is not even 3 years old yet. And he was just crying and just all upset. And his dad to say, okay, we can tell you're upset. I just want you to blow my fingers down. So his boy went, and my son put his fingers down. And I saw a dad use a skill that took just seconds, but calmed a boy down. I did not know those skills when I was a mom. If these are skills, I feel like these are simple skills. If we could somehow help the community know them, it would just allow them to build more things, like build the relationships and build the skills in their children. And so I get excited when I hear we can do this, and I thought, but we must do it. How do we start?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you do parenting during COVID times, right?
Yes. So parenting needs and challenges have been probably our number one here. I mean, and that's the thing about transforming kids' lives. A majority of the work that we do has to be with the parents then, right? So I mean, this is great that we can give services to children, but when it comes to the parents, it's necessary that they are able to also learn these skills. I mean, that what you just described is amazing. I mean, that is another type of, I think just like a bank of skills that we are not even thinking about when we have children. But I would say that when it comes down to working with parents, the biggest thing here is, how do I even start with my own anxiety and when it comes to COVID? And that, I think, has really driven the work that we do. I can't even parent if I can't take care of my own anxiety. I mean, questions regarding grief, losing family members. How do you do that? And you're stuck at home. You can't even go to a funeral. You can't do your normal grieving processes out in the world because of the coronavirus. And that I think it has been a really important part of the work that I do. And especially just, I have to sit at home with my kids more hours in the day than I used to. We have, as far as behavior management has been a big thing. Really understanding our children who may have special needs. Those are some of the topics that I think are higher on the question and answer, I would say, for our own organization.
We want to let the viewers who don't know the number that they can text a question into know the number. The number is 307-655-6396. For questions for Kathryn, please dial that number. We have a viewer question here. It said, I know many people who would like to see a therapist, but aren't willing to or can't pay for it. What's the next best option for someone like that? How can we reduce the price or increase accessibility of therapy?
That is a great question. That is a wonderful question. I think that organizations like Child Mind Institute, we're always thinking of that. I mean, trying to make things affordable is in the works, I think, across the nation, just because of the need. But when it comes down to understanding what your resources are, I always point to what you can find. So whether that is discounted therapeutic sessions, whether it's that you join a group because that's cheaper than the individual sessions, know your resources there. But what you can also know are your resources when it comes down to how you're feeling. So knowing where to go when you're feeling those big, intense emotions. So I want to say, know your resources when it comes to entertainment. Know your resources when it comes to having to, I don't know, I'm thinking of just like being able to do things outside, knowing those types of things. What are some of my resources, my go-tos when it comes to my own mental health and how I can make myself feel better? Your toolkit. I mean, there is an activity that I typically do with kids, and it's called the self-soothe kit, and it's really just focusing on your senses. So what can I see that makes me feel calm? What can I smell? What can I hear? Those are the types of resources that I think we're not thinking as resources, but it's resources for us. It's a toolkit that we can go to and say, okay, these are the types of things that will help me regulate my emotions. YouTube videos, knowing when to have those. There's free workshops. There are organizations that are putting together lots of different kits if you need housing, if you need food, things like that. Know what your resources are, and it takes a little bit of search, but also knowing other people can help that too. So reaching out to your friends, reaching out to family that knows resources as well, and being able to say and be vulnerable and say, I need the help. I need to seek additional help. That I think probably should have been the first thing that I said, because that can be a different, a difficult experience itself. But like I said, knowing your toolkit, knowing your resources, whether that looks like a stress management. Your resource could even be a stress ball. You just have to be able to find what works for you.
I love several things about that answer. I love, first of all, that you think before. We're all going to have times of need. Every person is going to have stress to a point that they will need support one way or the other. So I love thinking beforehand, what are the tools I have? And then talking about them as tools so that your children are hearing that I am using this tool now, because I loved how you brought that in, that right now I'm feeling a lot of emotions because you're having a tantrum, and so I need to use my tools. So you're actually teaching by talking yourself through what you need, and then you're teaching your children as they see that. So I love that answer. And we're going to pay for it one way or the other if we don't get help.
Correct.
Exactly. And modeling that, I would say, saves you from a couple dollars for sure. But you're modeling that so that your kids can see that, and then they're going to take that on. And so in the long run, it's more so cost effective when you're preventative. But if that's not the case and it's after the fact, that is okay. And we can tend to feel that, like I said, with wanting to know all of the answers and being able to tell our kids, and it's okay to say, I don't know right now, especially with the coronavirus, I don't know. But we typically don't use that. We try to not to use that. But that's also something that we need to feel a little bit more comfortable about.
Thank you. Kathryn, I am just fascinated by this conversation because I think many times when you become a parent, they give you this baby and you go home and you're just figuring it out, right? Mm-hmm. And so to be able to get this information out, I think then supports us in the work of prevention, right? Intervention is expensive. Prevention is so much cheaper. And so one piece that I've really taken in this conversation is when you discuss general mental health and that environment. And so what do you think is the places of intersectionality where we can be part of that state of being and that place of thoughts, right? I think as we move forward and think about action, what can that look like for us? And where is that intersectionality?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we're thinking about, when it comes to this kind of like more so home, community, and then school model, I think it needs to just be embedded in the curriculum. I don't think that this should be some sort of yes, let's get down to it, is that I want this radical change for education that looks like we care about how you're going to develop as a human being, not just academically.
Yes. Yes.
So it looks like, assigning this homework and even asking about it later. How did this homework make you feel? Was it really stressful? Did you understand the material? I don't know how many times that I've had conversations with kids that say, their homework frustrated them. They didn't do it. Why would you do something and then it frustrates you, right? We don't do it as adults, so why would we expect kids to do that? Or when we can't comprehend something. And I hate to say this, but it's a little bit harder for us to say, well, mom and dad can help me at home. That's not the reality for everyone. And we have to understand that. But so what we do is we integrate social emotional learning in the curriculum all throughout. So for some schools, that looks like, in an American Tragedy, it was starting with 7th grade in Australia, right? And just everyone getting this knowledge about mindfulness and what that is. We need to just make this, from the Head Start program, from the pre-K, we need to make this all up until, I would say this can even go to college. I love wellness programs in college, but this needs to be in the public education system. When it comes to at home, that's when we have the liberty to not engage, and that's what we need to step out of. We need to not be okay with us not being able to have these conversations with each other. We need to ask each other at home how we're actually feeling and get to know one another. Just because we're family doesn't, I think with families and being a parent, it's really hard because with your relationship with your children, it can almost feel like, of course I know my kid. I raised my kid. Of course, but there's so many things that I hear kids say that, my mom or dad doesn't know anything about this. I would never tell them this. Focus on your relationship with your children, and so that you can have a better bond. And I would say that even with the teachers will, incorporating the social emotional skills, they're going to have to do that too. Think about your relationship as a teacher. I mean, kids say that too. I mean, the relationship with the teacher can definitely, and it's actually studies that prove this, it can have an influence on how they do academically. When it comes to community, that's when I'm thinking about those policies, and I'm thinking about the big picture. I mean, we got to get out there and tell our representatives that we need.
You're frozen.
Got them froze on us for 1 second. So
There's a lot of different perspectives. Oh,
there you
sorry,
go, Kathryn. There you go. You're with us. You're back. You're back with us. It happens. Keep going. Go.
Yeah, it
so
happens.
You were saying the community piece. You were at the community piece. If you want to just, keep going.
Yes, with the community piece. I mean, it looks like for some, it looks like we have to defund the police, or we need to do, there's lots of different things that people have come up with. But we'll leave it to the community members to say, you need to listen to what we have to say as a community. And we need to demand that a lot more, I would say. I mean, whatever practices, I respect everyone's practices when it comes to how they advocate. But with these protests that happened recently, people said, I want to stand up for something. And that is the type of action that we need when it comes to our own communities, because we are the drivers of this. If we don't agree with someone, we need to speak out about it. It's going to take some work when it comes to that community build up. But we need people who are a part of this, part of that system and that structure, to say, I'm going to listen to what my community has to say. And if that's you that wants to be the person to listen to the community, go for it, please.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that, and your honesty and authenticity in that, and just saying it's our responsibility, and we have to own that and hold that. So thank you for saying that.
And from a parental perspective of a mother who had a daughter who she was dealing with some major mental illnesses and kept them in herself, and felt like she didn't want to tell me because she thought it would scare me, and it would have, but I would rather know. I think parents often want to know more, and the children also need to learn how to open up more. Both the parents need to learn how to have a safe environment where the child can open up, but the children need to also learn to open up. And I don't know, I mean, to me, it's a hand in a glove. They've got to go together, or if one's there and the other isn't, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, so when it comes to our older kids, I mean, this is something we'll have to work on together, right? I think with the younger kids, this is the prime time. This is a perfect time for you to really model that behavior so that they can grow up and they can come to you and say, you know what, I can now feel that I can tell you about this, or I can trust you with this, because that relationship is there. Now, if your kids are in high school, they're not too far gone, or if they're in college or what have you, it's still that relationship building. A lot of it too is, I hear kids, I didn't say anything because I think they'll get mad at me. And it's about, they have a perception of you that you really want. You may not want to hear it, right? You may not want to hear that, but you're going to be working together in order to have a better relationship. That's when you'll have that. That's when you'll have this, a better, I would say, turnout in terms of what they're open about talking to you about. And that this is, like I said, this isn't going to be something that happens overnight. This is a relationship that you're building. So it's going to take some time, but I think what we take away from this social emotional learning piece is that there's a social part of this. I mean, we talk a lot about the emotions, a lot about how we can manage that. But there's the first part of that is the social, and it's about working with other people, and it's about thinking about how we solve problems with other people, and that includes our parents. And does that change our view of our parents? Does that change the view of our kids as that goes along? We have to be aware of that. And so, like I said, starting with the younger kids, model that behavior so that you can help them. And now as an adult, or with your children being, older kids, it's about saying it's not too late for me to have this relationship with you.
We have a follow-up question, I think, from a viewer. How do you keep an open door about feelings with your kids from childhood to teenagers? It seems like they will definitely look different as kids are different ages.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it does look different based on age. And I mean, I think of things a little bit differently just because of the work that I do, but the stages of development mean a lot to me. Because I mean, once they're in this sort of identity kind of stage of their childhood, and that is, you know, in those teen years, that is really a big place where they're trying to learn a lot about themselves. You could actually be the driver and then learning about themselves. A lot of things that are a part of you, that's going to be a part of them as well. And so aiding that conversation, when it comes to how it looks differently, I mean, I think it's really about the conversation. When kids are younger and, you know, there's something like a tragedy to talk about or something like that, that's a little bit harder to discuss. I mean, it's helpful for them to know a specific amount of information, and then if they have questions, follow up. When kids get older, they have more follow-up questions, and it's about how do you answer those questions. Younger kids, I think we don't want to overload them with information. There's a lot that their brains are working on right now, or at that time. But once the kids get older, it's about that information and how much they you know, can get from their parents, and understanding perspectives. I mean, why there's so many things that we do, or the perspective that we have, or the things that we do around our house that just come from our parents. And so they're learning those things because they're observing you as well as a parent. So as they're little kids, you may be able to get away with, you know, maybe like a broader conversation, or this was what this looks like. But once you be honest and be transparent as they get older, that's what it'll look like differently as they grow.
It's true. I think it's that continuation of just walking alongside them, right? Holding their hand, doing that work with them. That kind of leads us into the last question that we have for this evening, and you were kind of taking us there. So I'd just love for you to kind of just tease it out a little more around one or two different action items for new parents, right? Something you wish you would have known, or something that you wish you didn't know. But for our parents, this is a viewer question, just looking for support.
Yeah, so action items. So I really want to think about involvement, and I think levels of involvement and finding a balance. That's our first action item, because when it comes to involvement, I personally feel like involvement in school, that I find parents that are super involved, and then I find parents that it's just, I don't even hear from them, and it's really hard to get a hold of them. But I would say finding a balance in how to be involved with your school or your kids' schools is going to be an important part, because you are part of that home life, you are part of that school life, but you're also part of the community. So you can also be that connection to all three systems there. So it's about involvement, finding that. So when you're thinking of how you can get involved, does that look like you being a part of a PTA? Or does that look like you checking in with your child every day as far as what's going on or how they're feeling, right? It's about what level in balance and what you are looking for. So thinking of ways that feel comfortable with you, and of course it's going to look differently for every family, every parent. But like I said, you can think about, well, I'd like to be a part of the community discussions. Maybe I go to board meetings. Maybe I go to, just try to find some sort of involvement you can have so that you can be well informed, right? So finding that, and then I would say the second piece of this is the relationships. So you really want to nurture the relationship. Remember that everything that you do and you say goes into this relationship. And what does that look like longer term? I mean, I think that for me, what I wish I would have known is that there's so many things that I'm carrying, right? And it's just being projected. It's just being all projected. And I want kids to feel like they can feel heard, but also that we're not just dumping all the things, all the traumas that we might have, all the things that we maybe haven't solved, and we're putting that on the kids. focus on how that relationship is, because it is going to things build up. These are like dominoes, and as you're building the blocks, as the dominoes fall, you really want to think about the intentions, right, and the impact on what you have for your kids, right? So you have the intentions to love and care for them, I'm sure, but the impact may be very different than that. And it's about checking in. And like I said, there's a balance in this, because we can find that, being overbearing is not helpful sometimes, and not being involved at all, and not really thinking about that relationship and dissecting that can be harmful. But it's really about finding the balance. And that's going to take you. This is not, this is a mutual relationship. It's going to take you being transparent, you doing the work in your own selves. And then that's also going to be modeled for them and how they can do the work with themselves. And then you have a relationship right there. That's what it's about. So involvement, relationship, and hopefully through that, as we do that at school, as we do that with the community, as we do that at home, we can really get to this change and see that kids are enhanced in their mental health, and overall that's going to change society a great deal.
Love
Amen to that.
We are so grateful, Kathryn. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all that you do to help parents and children. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, as the parents start doing this and the children start learning it, we're changing all of society. It's just like the most powerful possibility of change, and the most hopeful possibility of a vibrant life. So grateful for you and for Child Mind Institute and all that they do, and just wish you the very best. And for those of you who are listening, we'd love to have you go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, as we are working on short films to help parents specifically with skills. And so we look forward to becoming more involved in this parental part, and wish you a wonderful